I don't know about you, but I am a big movie fan. I really enjoy anything with a good underdog storyline. The person is down and out with no chance of reaching their goals. They go through hardships, they go through trials, and eventually they harness their potential to do the unthinkable. This, in the entertainment business, is called a story arc. Disney, for example, is famously known for their specific format of story arc. More or less, their story arc allows others to picture themselves as a hero of their own story. It gives you a relatable problem, provides a difficult decision, gives you an unexpected event, and even puts you through their trials and tribulations so that you can see how you or they would grow. In the end, you are able to relate and get the impression that you can tackle a similar issue in the same way that Simba or Woody or Elsa, Mr. Incredible, or even Tony Stark are able to do. But you see, we're not in the movies. The stories in a movie or a TV show are concluded in just a few short hours or in a few episodes. They have a clear purpose and a story arc that ensures that everything works out. Our story is way more complex, and our purpose is often unknown. It is often difficult to discern what decisions we should or we should not make. It's also difficult to figure out what we should or we should not do. This is especially the case when it comes to our emotions. Now you may be speaking and saying, well, Josh, you are a guy, you don't have a lot of emotions. Well, I can tell you that I live with 3 little girls, and all of them are unique, much like myself. They all have and use different emotions to make their decisions. Claire, my oldest, she's all about competition. She desires to be the best, and she's going to win at all costs. Mia, on the other hand, is very dependent on her happiness. She desires and wants to feel happy and loved. Maddie, my youngest, she's all about inclusion. She desires to be a part of everything. You see, each of them make decisions based on different desires or different outcomes, which is all completely predicated on their emotions. We do the same thing as people. For example, have you ever tried to go to the store when you are hungry? Have you ever tried to watch the news when you are worried? Have you ever tried to look at Facebook and found yourself needing a new boat or a new car or a new widget or gadget? You see, our emotions often lead to more issues and take us off track. And that leads us to the big idea of the day. Emotional decisions degrade your arc's potential. Emotional decisions degrades your arc's potential. The decisions we make will directly impact the amount of potential we have in our story. Using our emotions to make decisions often leads to bad decisions, meaning we're not using any logic. Bad decisions or not logical decisions will decrease our potential and lead us away from our purpose. Good decisions will increase our potential and ensure that we move towards our purpose. We can always recover, but we can never rewind or go back in our story. That's one of the biggest differences between life and movies. Now here's 3 different ways that emotional decisions could squander our potential. The first is, emotional decisions make every decision about you. Emotional decisions make every decision about you. To give you an idea of what I mean, we have been looking at the story of King Saul. You see, Saul is a person who had great potential. He was tall, handsome, a warrior with charm that people would love. He's God's appointed first chosen king of Israel. He had everything going for him, but he constantly squandered his potential. Last week we started into the story where Saul had been anointed king by Samuel. He had experienced several signs confirming that God had chosen him to be king, and Saul had chosen not to acknowledge any of this or share it with others. As Samuel brings him in front of the nation of Israel to basically describe and introduce Saul as their king, Saul runs and hides among some baggage. As a result, some people did not believe he was meant to be king and started to scoff at him. About a month later is where we pick it up today. The Ammonites are led by a king into an Israelite town. The citizens ask for peace and a treaty. They don't want any war with the Ammonites. The king of the Ammonites says he will sign one of their treaties and they can have peace if they will just allow him to gouge out one of their eyes. Of course, the citizens look at this and think, I don't want to be disgraced in that way. I don't want to disgrace Israel. And also, that sounds really painful. So they ask for 7 days to see if anybody will come and fight for them. They send a message throughout the Israelite towns, and eventually it makes its way to Saul. This is where we pick up the story. In 1 Samuel 11:6, it says, Then the Spirit of God came powerfully upon Samuel, and he became very angry. You see, he was out in his field, and at this point in time, he heard this news because everybody was crying and sad. And so at this moment, instantly the Spirit of God comes upon him, but in this moment, he starts to experience an emotion. This emotion he experienced is anger. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like I can relate to Saul's situation. As I said, I have 3 daughters, so it's pretty easy to come up with many of these situations. I've stepped on Lego Duplos in the dark. I've cleaned or painted over pretty drawings on or near the hallway. I've found dried up gum stuck in different seats. In all of these moments, my immediate response is not one that I'm proud of. I was not rational. I was full of llama drama, as we like to say in our house. I hollered and I complained. I did not show love and grace. This not only degraded my ark's potential, but also degraded my daughters as well. I don't know about you if you've ever tried to make a decision when you're angry and never seems to work out. And this leads us to our next point, which is that emotional decisions push your feelings above everyone else. Emotional decisions push your feelings above everyone else. Just like my anger had negatively impacted my daughters and potentially their ability to handle situations in the future, there was the same response from Saul. You see, he was so angry that he responds with his feelings and not with logic. We continue in 1 Samuel 11:7. It says he took 2 oxen, he was in the field, they were near him, and he cut them into pieces and sent the messengers to carry them throughout Israel with the message. So you have to imagine if you're one of the Israelites, you get a message and it's got a piece of oxen in them, blood all over the place. So it's a little nerve-wracking, little scary. And then you get to read this message. This is what will happen to the oxen of anyone who refuses to follow Saul and Samuel into battle. Now, oxen were essentially their cars or their tractors. It was their way of life, how they got around, what they used. It was their primary tool. So to be told that oxen would be taken away and brutally beaten and basically you wouldn't have any is quite scary for your life. It's something that would prevent you from being able to do anything else. In this particular case, Saul was putting his emotions over God's will. It was Saul that was saying, hey, come follow me, instead of him saying, follow God. Instead of the people following Saul because he was being used by God, they followed him in fear. An emotional leader is always someone who will bring fear to any organization or home because about how they feel and what they will do. You see, I had that same reaction with the girls. I didn't respond in kindness or love. I hollered and I was angry. And as a result, it instituted fear instead of love and kindness. Saul instituted fear, which ensured it brought others forward. That brings us to our next point, which is that emotional decisions put your glory above God's. Emotional decisions put your glory above God's. In 1 Samuel 11:7-8, it continues by saying, and the Lord made the people afraid of Saul's anger, and all of them came out together as one. When Saul mobilized them at Bezek, he found that there were 300,000 men from Israel and 30,000 men from Judah. You see, his actions not only affected himself, but it affected 330,000 people. Saul responds to the town of Israelites that he has come to save them. He says, I have an army and I will come the next day. He shows up and surprises the Ammonites and he destroys them all. In 1 Samuel 11:12, it continues, then the people exclaimed to Samuel, now, where are those men who said, why should Samuel rule over us? Bring them here and we will kill them. You see, this response from the people is one of anger. This is the same display that their leader, King Saul, had shown when he heard the news. They immediately gave credit to King Saul and not to God. They wanted to remove anyone that was against him. They showed no love and no grace. And as I noted before, I have 3 girls, and I was not proud of my response in those same situations. I can tell you that my actions have been repeated by my girls as well. You see, I was focused on me and my anger the same way that Saul was focused on him and his anger, not the will of God. As a result, my arc potential was degraded, and it degraded the others around me, the same way that it degraded King Saul and the people around him. The good news is that we can recover our arc potential. In 1 Samuel 11:13-15, it goes on to say, but Saul replied, no one will be executed today, for today the Lord has rescued Israel." You see, in this moment, he recognizes that God is over all and it is God's win, not his. Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us all go to Gilgal to renew the kingdom." So they all went, and in solemn ceremony before the Lord, they made Saul king. Then they offered peace offerings to the Lord, and Saul and all the Israelites were filled with joy. See, this moment that they turned toward God, this moment that they showed love and kindness, the moment that they gave credit where it was due, they were filled with joy. They were starting to move back towards their purpose. You see, Saul made a dramatic change in this moment, and he led the people back to God. He showed them what kind of king he could be. He started to recover his arc potential. In the same way, we can recover ours. How different would your life be 1 year from now if you chose to maximize your potential? What if we all began to make decisions full of God's wisdom instead of our emotions? To treat our friends, family, and neighbors as we would like to be treated instead of how we feel. To focus on glorifying God instead of glorifying ourselves. Imagine how radically different it would be, or your life would be, if you could choose to do this. How radically would your friends, colleagues, neighbors, spouses, and children be if you chose to do this as well? This is something that we can do and we can all be a part of. We can all recover our arc potential. We can all show the glory of God, not only to ourselves, but to others. And we can fulfill our purpose in a great way if we can just do these things. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you all join us next week for part 3 of our current series, How to Squander Your Potential.